Hey gamers, are you confused? Are you overwhelmed by Path of Exile 2? Are you watching streamers like Asmongold, DS Lily, Darth Microtransaction blaze through the content while you're still just looking at the passive screen, wondering what coincidences in your life happened leading up to you being here, not understanding anything? Don't worry, I got you.
Bend over. Drop your pants and get over my lap. All you have to do is walk away.
I'm going to explain some of the basics of the game for beginners so that hopefully you can play the game with confidence and get through the maps, the end game, where all of us want to be, right? Right? So maybe you just got into Path of Exile 2, right? And like me, when I started Path of Exile 1, you're really confused and you're just getting started, trying to figure things out. You're getting frustrated. Just chill for a second. I'm going to try to explain as much as I can to make the game easier for you to get into. So let's start with the very basics. At this time in early access, there's 6 starter characters for you to choose from. Of those 6, you can pick whichever one you think is the coolest. There are a lot of builds that depend on the ascendancy of the characters. There's 2 ascendancies per character that you can choose from. But for right now, you're a beginner, you don't know anything. Just pick the one you think is coolest, right? It doesn't matter. Whichever one looks cool to you, go with that one for now. When you get to the shore after you've made your character, I recommend that you use WASD as your movement. If you're playing on console, obviously you're playing with the controller. If you're playing on PC and you want to play with the controller, go with that. Now, when you're going through the tutorial, you want to make sure that you equip any equipment, items, skill gems, or anything that they give you. Each character should have a scripted drop of some type to help you get through the tutorial. At least a weapon, right? The boss in the tutorial is pretty easy, man. Once you get used to it, its patterns and everything, you just need to pay attention to when it starts to do its attacks and dodge out of the way. There's going to be some ads that you have to deal with, but it's not a big deal. Another thing that can help with the boss is to go ahead and use the skill points that you gain in the tutorial. You are only going to have 2 options, so just pick whichever one you think you're going to want out of the 2 that are available to you. Doesn't really matter right now. You can undo them later. I beat the tutorial and the tutorial boss with a sorceress with no weapon, just bare melee, just to see if it was possible, and to kind of do it as a joke for my melee build, so you can definitely do it with anything. Alright, so once you get out of the tutorial, there's a few things that I need to go over with you, make clear, so that you're prepared for the rest of your journey, your adventure, right? I'm going to start off by listing some mechanics, items, equipment, etc. in the game, and explaining what they are. First up, we've got skill gems. Skill gems are basically just your skills in the game. They're not on a tree. Skill gems come blank. You pick the ones that you want, and the only requirements you're required to meet to use a certain skill is if you're using the right weapon that is for that skill, if it's a weapon skill, or if you have the intelligence, strength, or dexterity required for the skill, or the level of your character and the level of the skill or skill gem. You can use any skill on any character. There's nothing stopping you other than weapon and stat from using, like, say, a shield charge on a witch. You can do whatever you want. Have fun and experiment, right? On that note, there's something called a support gem. You also pick these up blank as uncut skill gems. Support gems can help make your build more efficient, or they can, like, really screw you over, right? So when you're picking these, and again, you get to pick any of them that are supported for that gem. When you're picking them, make sure after you've put them into the skill, as I'm showing here on the screen, that you test them and make sure that they're actually doing what they say they're doing, because some of the skills, the interactions, I believe are broken. Not that surprising. It happens, but just make sure and test them out. Make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do. An additional quick note on skill gems and support skill gems. There is a checkbox in the bottom left of this window here. If you uncheck that when you're making a support gem, if you click on the skill on the left, you should be able to see all support skill gems that hypothetically support that skill gem. I'm going to go over spirit gems real quick. Spirit gems are essentially skill gems that give you passives that activate based on a stat called spirit, which you need in order to use them. When you create a spirit gem, make sure when you equip it in your skill gem panel that you right click the icon so that you get this little swirly bit here and you know it's active. All right, next up is the passive skill tree. The passive skill tree is probably the most daunting part of playing Path of Exile or Path of Exile 2, at least in the beginning. It's not that scary though. I'll explain. So I'm not going to go into like too many specifics, but I'll tell you that to make this easier, there's a very helpful method in the top right of the passive skill window. It's a search bar. You can search for stats, modifiers, abilities. You can search for anything that you can think of that you've seen in the game that's on there. So like if you want to make your minions stronger, you just type minions in the box and then all of the minion related nodes will light up. This is going to be really, really important and valuable for planning your build if you're making your own build as you go along. On the topic of the passive skill tree, let's go ahead and talk about jewels, okay? On the passive skill tree, you'll see these jewel slots. Jewels are items in the game that you pick up and you can put them in the passive skill tree in order to improve your stats somehow or improve some other aspect of your character. Some of these can be really valuable, so make sure you hold on to them. And if you have duplicates, later on you might be able to do something fun with that. So just hang on to them. And also, it might not be a terrible idea at this point to look up some build guides for the character that you pick. It's your first time playing Path of Exile. You're not going to know what's going on. And unless you're a crazy person like me who just wants to wing it and figure it out on their own, it's probably not a bad idea to have a guide handy to help you navigate through the game the first time. Also, don't let anyone guilt you into playing the game the way they want you to play it, okay? If you enjoy winging it and struggling and suffering like me, do that. Don't look for other people's approval to enjoy your video game. That should be like pretty straightforward and commonly known by now, but you know, people still have a hard time understanding that they need to let people enjoy things the way they want to enjoy them. So I just thought I'd say that. Next up, we have equipment. It's pretty commonly known at this point that equipment is where you get 90% of your power from in Path of Exile 2. I'm not going to go over all the stats. I am going to go over the armor types right here, just to make it a little easier to understand what you're looking at when you're looking at gear. First up, we have evasion. It makes you harder to hit. That's all you need to know. Energy shield. It's like a second life bar. And then you have armor, which hypothetically reduces the amount of damage you take, but it doesn't. Really, I don't know. A lot of people say it's not working. I know I get my butt kicked when I use it, so maybe don't use it right now. I don't know. Take my opinion with a grain of salt. Another thing to keep in mind is stun and stun threshold. There's a bar underneath the name of a boss or creature that you're fighting that will fill up, and when it fills up, that creature becomes stunned. You also have stun that can affect you, and that's what you use stun threshold for, is to prevent that. Next up, we have charms. There's a new mechanic in Path of Exile 2, which is charm. You put these into a charm slot on your belt, which belts, believe it or not, can have more than one charm slot. It's extremely rare, but it can happen. But basically what charms do is if there is a requirement, like you must be hit with fire damage, it will do the thing. So let's say we have a charm. It gives you 25% increased fire resistance. When you're hit with fire damage, it lasts for 3 seconds. It has 80 charges and it uses 40 for the 3 seconds. Boom. You get hit with fire damage. It does the thing. Moving on. Now we're going to talk about runes. In Path of Exile 1, slots on gear were for skill gems and support gems. In Path of Exile 2, slots are for runes. Now, unlike Path of Exile 1, in Path of Exile 2, you cannot unsocket runes after you put them in. You cannot replace them. You cannot unsocket them. They're stuck. At this time of writing, when you put a rune in something, it's there forever. There are other types of things you can put in rune sockets that are not just runes. In Ultimatum, you can get an item from bosses or rares that does more stuff than just basic runes. So keep an eye out. Keep anything that looks like it goes in a rune socket. I'll show a list right here of things that can go in rune sockets. Next up, we have flasks. In Path of Exile 2, you get 2 of them. 1 health, 1 mana. Upgrade them frequently. As soon as you can. You can roll transmutation and alteration orbs on them, make them better. Upgrade them whenever you can. On the note of flasks, in every town there is a well where you can recharge your flasks if you touch the well. That's pretty important. You can kind of cheese some stuff if you're having trouble. Just do it. It's fine. It's not cheating. It's there for you. Alright, next up we have gold. In Path of Exile 1, gold was like not a thing forever until very recently. So in Path of Exile 2, you can use gold for a lot of things. Buying and selling items with vendors. using the currency exchange, and respecing your passive skill tree, which is pretty important. In Path of Exile 1, you had to grind Orbs of Regret, and that was the only way for a very long time that you could respec other than making a new character. So gold is pretty important. It's not as important as the actual like currency orbs, but it's still pretty up there. One of the downsides of gold is that you cannot trade it with other players. So it is not a store of value. It is only a store of the ability to do things, such as respecking or trading currencies. All right, next up, we're going to talk about vendors. In every main area of the game, in the campaign, in your hideout, in the in-game area, there's going to be vendors. They're NPCs, and there's several different types, and they're all pretty useful. Here's a vendor that sells random items. You can only buy as many random items of any type, any combined. It's a group, it's a pool of as many unique monsters you have killed in that act. So keep that in mind. It's in the bottom right. Keep track of that number. There's always going to be a vendor that disenchants items, which we'll get into that later, and buys and sells like magic stuff and flasks and things of that nature. And in Act 1, that's Una. There's always going to be, well, typically there's going to be an armor vendor. In Act 1, that's Renly. And there's also going to be an option to use the currency exchange, and that is going to be at the random item vendor. Depends on the act which one that is, but that's in Cruel. So don't worry about that now. I did make a video on trading for beginners, and that goes over the currency exchange and all of that. You can go and watch that video for more explanation there. But again, unlocks in Cruel difficulty for the currency exchange. And that's always going to be at the random item vendor or at Alva in your hideout. So I said we were going to get to it, and we're getting to it now. Disenchanting. When you collect gear, odds are a lot of that gear is going to be worthless to you, okay? It's not going to be good, it's not going to be valuable, but it's going to have blue or yellow text, okay? While we're here, a blue item is a magic item, a yellow item is a rare item, and an orange item is a unique. All of these can be disenchanted. What disenchanting is I give the vendor, the disenchanting vendor, that item, and they give me, in exchange, a certain number of shards. When you get enough shards, they can be combined into an orb. And an orb is a currency that can be used for different things. I made a beginner's guide on crafting that will explain some of the orbs, but if you just go through and read the tooltips, you can pretty much understand. Now we're going to get to dismantling. Dismantling is similar to disenchanting, but it only works on items that have quality or rune slots. And how you gain access to this is you do a quest in Act 1 to find Renly's tools, and once you do that, you gain access to the dismantling bench where you can do this. This gives you artificer shards, which can be combined into an artificer's orb, which will add a socket on a piece of equipment. Now we're going to talk about the reforging bench. What the reforging bench does is it takes 3 identical items, same rarity, same icon, and it re-rolls those 3 into 1 new item. This is useful if you have 3 rings that don't have mods that you want or something like that, and then you can throw them in here, hit reforge, and get a new roll. So maybe you get something that you like this time. All right, now we're going to talk about a different topic other than items, okay? We're going to talk about ascendancies. What these are is basically your character's like Super Saiyan form, right? We're going from like a level 1 nobody to a level 20 thug, right? We have 2 options per character. When you do a certain event called a Trial of Sekimas, you gain ascendancy points. When you have these ascendancy points, you can choose of the 2 options for your ascendancy. Be careful. Read through these. If you're following a guide, go with the one they tell you to do. If you're not, read through them all. You cannot undo this. You only ever get 8 points if you're lucky to put into this. So make sure that the one that you pick is good and that you like it. And good is subjective. So do with that what you will. When the full game releases, you're going to have 3 options and 12 characters. So 36 different combinations. I'm going to be spending a lot of money on character slots. Okay, so to actually get an Ascendancy, I already mentioned you have to do the Trial of Secamus. That's in Act 2. And Act 3, you have to do the Temple of Chaos Ultimatum. In the first half of the game, Act 1 through 3, you're going to have infinite retries. For Cruel difficulty and for Endgame, you have to randomly drop these opportunities to even attempt it. So when you do it again, I'm not going to explain what it is, but when you do them the third and fourth time, it is not gonna be that fun. I'm just being honest with you. Some people are like gods at the game and they already got theirs. Cool, good for them. I don't have them. I don't have the third or the fourth one, so I wouldn't sweat it that much. Just get your 4 points from the Act 2 and 3, and for now, you'll be good. Okay, so I covered some of that stuff. Let's go over what you're going to be doing in the campaign. I'm not going to spoil anything. I'm just going to give you the general game loop. Essentially, we're going to be doing repeatedly some kind of mission or objective, returning to town, talking to an NPC, dropping off our loot, and then going back. And then if you fill up your inventory in between that, you can just go back to town with the town portal, drop off your loot, and continue. It's very similar to like an extraction game, because extraction games inventory systems were based off of ARPGs. If you ever get lost while doing the campaign, like I did a few times, you can either just run around or you can kind of Google it. But even if you Google it, you're not going to know exactly where to go. You're still going to have to explore that area till you get lucky and find it. Because as it is, the maps are kind of randomized. So to recap real quick, go to your objective, kill monsters. When your inventory is full, teleport back to town. Sell, disenchant, reforge, or dismantle everything you got in your inventory, and then go back to your portal and continue where you left off. One thing that I do want to note here though, the instances on the maps that you're on, they only last for about 15 minutes when you're away from them. So make sure that you get all that stuff done in about 15 minutes and go back so that you don't have to re-clear everything. You'll still appear at roughly the same location, I believe, but it can just disappear. The other thing that you can do too is if you want to clear the map again, you can hold Control on the keyboard and click on the teleporter and spawn a new instance. All right, now I'm going to go over some stuff you might not be familiar with if you've never played Path of Exile. Resistances. Okay, there's 4 types: fire, cold, lightning, and chaos. Go to your character page and look at your resistances, right? That's important. While you are going through the campaign, you're gonna lose some of that. Hypothetically, if you have 0 right now, after you finish some act of the campaign, some portion of the campaign, you might go negative. So what we want to do is consistently build up our resistances as much as possible. Now, chaos is hard to get. It's expensive because it's hard to get. So if you see chaos on a piece of gear, you might want to hang on to it and sell it or use it later or upgrade it or do something, because it might be valuable. Now, when I went through the game, gear didn't drop that much. It was really, really hard to get good gear. But luckily you guys starting now, they've raised the drop rates quite a bit. So you're going to be having lots of gear to choose from. Now resistances, they cap at 75. That's like a hard cap. But there are ways to get around the 75% cap. You should try to get all of your resistances capped at 75. But I'll be honest with you, that goal is kind of a long ways off. In case it wasn't clear, resistances reduce your damage taken from a certain type by that much. Next, I want to talk about elemental exposure and ailments. In Path of Exile 2, there are certain elemental skills that will do stuff to you or your enemies depending on what kind of element it is. For instance, cold damage has cold buildup, which will eventually cause you or the enemy to be chilled or frozen, depending on who's the one casting the skill, right? And ailments are those things that happen as a result of the type of elemental damage. So ignite, freeze, and shock. So here's a couple things I failed to mention earlier, but they are pretty core to your experience. Dodge roll and active block. Dodge roll is new to Path of Exile 2. It wasn't in Path of Exile 1, and it's not in a lot of ARPGs. Basically on PC, we hit the spacebar and we do a dodge roll. This is really useful for avoiding certain mechanics. For instance, a line of fireballs flying at your face, you can hit the dodge roll, and if you time it right, you can go right under them. There's a boss that I'm not going to spoil, but it has a combat arena that slowly closes in, and there's a bunch of spears that shoot at you from all sides. And the only way to survive, other than just like having godly resistances and like stats, is to dodge roll through the spears. An active block, if you're wearing a shield, it actually gives you a skill that you can use to raise the shield to block damage in front of you. I'm not sure on the effectiveness of that. I don't use it, but you can experiment with it and see if you like it. All right, so now we're going to go through some general tips. As I mentioned earlier, you can follow a build guide. If you're not confident with winging it, I highly recommend doing that on your first playthrough. If you like discovering things on your own, discover things on your own. Go for it, man. The world is your oyster. I believe in you. Another tip, I probably wouldn't just like randomly hoard gear unless you have a reason for it. Like you don't want to do it, you don't want to deal with it right now. I do that a lot. I have dump tabs. I just dump stuff in there and don't look at it until it's full. But generally, when you're getting started, if you're not going to use something, you're not going to sell it, and you're not going to trade it off to someone else, you should probably either dismantle it, reforge it, or disenchant it. You're going to need the stuff that you get from those things. You're going to need that stuff to make your currently existing or future gear better. Another thing I want to talk about, stash tabs. Okay, this is probably the most important tip in the entire video, and that's why I forgot to put it in there first and put it last. And it's not even written down. So I'm just being sarcastic. It actually is very important. It's extremely important. Every 3 weeks, there is a stash tab sale. If you go to any Path of Exile player and they have not at least spent like $5 on a stash tab, I don't know how they did that, but I applaud them. There are stash tabs for everything in the game almost. There are some things that they don't have the stash tabs for them yet. They're working on it, but for now, in the campaign, most everything you're going to be getting, with the exception of like waystones and trial stones, you're going to have a stash tab for it, and it's going to be very helpful. You can actually set what's called an affinity on a stash tab of a certain type, or even just basic stash tabs for certain items. And then whenever you control click that item from your inventory to your stash, it will just go where it's supposed to go. So for instance, the currency stash has a slot for every item that is a currency. Well, most of the currencies, most of the common ones. So when I control click on, let's say, a exalted orb, it goes right in its slot, and it's perfect. Totally worth the $7.50 or $6 on sale. Get stash tabs. If you can't wait for the stash tab sale, I recommend the currency tab, the gem tab, and at least 2 premium stash tabs. The premium stash tabs are required for trading. Again, go watch the trading video for beginners. It explains it. It's really easy. Okay, so that should start to scratch the surface on everything that's in this game. You should be well equipped to at least get through Act 1 through 3. I'm not going to recap everything. We covered a lot. I'm going to try to put chapters on the video so that you have sections to look at for reference. But thank you for watching the video. I'm live every night at 8 p.m. CST on Twitch. You can come by, ask questions. I do help people get clears. I would prefer that you figure out how to get the clear by yourself, but I know how it is. I've been there. You get very frustrated and you just want someone to help because you've been fighting the boss for like 2.5 hours. You can't figure out what you're doing wrong and you're just mad. I get that, and I will help you if I'm available or if I'm playing Path of Exile 2. I've been playing a little bit of Marvel Rivals recently. It's pretty fun. I used to play CSGO for like hundreds of hours a month. No, that's unrealistic. It was a lot though. So, you know, I like me some shooters every once in a while. I don't want to just do Path of Exile stuff on stream, but for videos right now, I'm good. I'm good with Path of Exile for videos. I also have a Discord if you want that. Just come by the stream and ask for it. I'll put it there. It might be in another video. That's fine. But yeah, thank you for watching the video. I know it was a long one. I tried to make it emphatic and energetic so that I could keep your attention long enough to help you. That's all I really want with this channel right now. I just want to help you get through the game and enjoy it like I enjoy it and like many other people enjoy it, and not be extremely frustrated and angry and upset like I was every time I played Path of Exile 1 for like 10 years, okay? It's not that hard to understand, and I understand now that back then I just wasn't letting my mind wrap around it. I was kind of stuck on the idea that gold was currency, and there was no gold in Path of Exile 1, and it did not make sense. And it still doesn't make sense a lot of times when I'm like, why is an exalted orb worth like 1/180th of a divine orb? That makes no sense to me. But it is what it is, man. It's a free market. It fluctuates, and that's kind of the fun of it once you get past the initial climb. This stuff that I covered today is very basic, very, very easy stuff. Like, you could probably figure it out by yourself. But if you're watching this video, there's a chance that you didn't, and there's something you don't understand. So I want to be here for you and help you understand it. If there's something that you need help with, put it in the comment in YouTube or come by Twitch and ask me. If it's not covered in this guide or another guide that I made before, I will help you. And then I'll go and make a guide so that for the next 100 people, I don't have to do it individually again. So I hope you have a good day. I hope you enjoy Path of Exile 2, and I hope you tell all your friends to buy it. All right, see ya. Just real quick, we're already at 25 minutes long for the video anyway. I thought I'd plug it. Twitch, like, subscribe. 99.8% of people who watch my videos are not subscribed, and that's cool, but you know, it'd be cooler if you were.